Welcome back to the table. Today, Ryan and I are going to give you a look at Phantom Epoch. Now, to say this game is ambitious is probably putting it mildly. This is a big campaign game, like 60, 80-hour cooperative gameplay. And I think it's fair to say, and we've cleared this with the publisher, so it is fair to say, this is it draws its inspiration. I don't know that I'd call it the love child of these things, but it draws inspiration from things like Mass Effect, the video game, as it relates to the setting, and not only the sci-fi setting, but sort of like a lot of the kinds of things you find yourself doing.
The vibe of the game.
And I'd say Gloomhaven in terms of inspiration, in terms of obviously the kind of tabletop game that it is, but also some of the things and the mechanisms you'll see will ring some familiar bells.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this definitely has a lot in common, not just with Gloomhaven, but with a lot of those tactical narrative games that's going to set you out on some kind of mission or scenario where you're going to be playing through in a tactical way, on a tactical map, fighting against enemies, searching for things, trying to complete various objectives, as well as doing narrative adventures outside of the map through the introduction of story cards or things you're going to be reading in the book. A lot of that is going to be multiple choice. A lot of that is going to take you on branching narratives, things that you'd kind of expect from a game of this scale. And if you're looking at it, here on the top view, I have basically everything spread out here. A lot of different cards, a lot of different boards and tiles and things like that. But what you're not going to see is map tiles, which is something that is very common in a lot of those games. This game actually does away with that completely.
Yeah, this one uses a couple books. And in fact, we should say this is a prototype. I'm not sure how representative this is, but I think it's along the line.
We definitely don't have all of the content in our prototype.
100% we don't have all the content. We've just played through the first couple, the tutorial, and a little bit beyond there. We don't want to spoil anything, so don't worry about that. We're not going to. But we're going to try to give you an idea of what the game is doing, and I think some of what it promises to do that we haven't maybe even touched ourselves. But yeah, these two books are going to be things that you flip through. In fact, we'll move these guys off so you can see.
Little spoiler alert, though. I don't want to ruin too much of it.
Yeah, there's different maps on the bottom, and then effectively what you're going to be doing at the top, because these missions are going to play out quite differently. And the general flow of the game is going to be such that you start at the tutorial, and you're going to go mission by mission. But between each mission, like Ryan alluded to, there's going to be some expeditions that you can go on, which are kind of like those multiple choice event cards that you might see. But it's going to kind of open up. There's multiple planets that you can go to. And eventually, the game promises to let you kind of go, okay, we could go over here to this planet. We maybe can go over to this planet and do this mission. You're going to unlock different things that you can do. And you're going to be able to upgrade not only your characters, but your ship. You've got this board here that you can't tell by looking at it right now, but there's these tiles that will pop out of those and potentially be replaced with secret components, because it is one of those games where you're going to have probably envelopes and things where you're going to open up and add to your ship. It's going to give you a whole bunch more things you can do.
Definitely. I mean, and this is a campaign game, if that is not clear by now. And like David said, it's a campaign game that takes place over the course of these 3 planets. And what's neat here is as you're doing your missions, as you're going out and making your decisions, you're going to unlock these missions. So it's not necessarily a linear experience. While, like David said, the tutorial does kind of open you up and it leads you into the bigger sandbox of the world. As you do things, it's going to tell you to unlock specific missions. After each mission, every time you do a mission on one of these different planets, you're going to be able to come back to the Phantom Epoch. That is the ship that you're on. You're going to be able to upgrade your characters, upgrade the board like David said. And upgrading your characters means possibly spending some skill points, getting some new items, some new equipment, some new attachments, a lot of stuff that you can do to kind of build out your character, including modifying your character's deck, which we'll talk about. But you're going to be able to do all that stuff, and then you're going to get to choose another mission to go on out of all the missions that you've unlocked. You might want to stay with the same planet, because the more missions you do for one planet, the more your fame goes up. As your fame goes up, you get recognized. It might unlock some story things, and it gives you access to higher tiers of items. You get some better equipment and things like that for sticking with the same planet. But you're going to be bouncing around a lot as you play through this game.
Yeah, and at the beginning of the game, you're going to kind of create your character. You're going to take a species and then sort of a character class, and you can build those together somewhat modularly. And then, like we said, those are going to evolve throughout the game depending on the upgrades that you get access to and what you add to your character. But one of the things we mentioned is the deck of cards you're going to be using. And I think this is one of the things that's going to, while ring bells from Gloomhaven, also feel a fair amount different.
Yeah.
Because the way cards are played in the game in a given mission is that everyone is going to play 2 cards face down.
Or more, possibly.
That's true. Or
you can actually play more in this game. Every character species has an action point limit. And this is one of the neat puzzles of the game. You're going to take a certain number of these action cards into every fight with you. And it becomes a hand management game at that point, because you're getting to choose which cards to play. But the total action points of all your cards can't exceed your maximum. So you need to decide, if you're playing 3 cards, 3 low-cost cards every time to get to your maximum, you're cycling through your deck faster. You'll have to rest more often to get those cards back. So there is definitely a balance. You're most likely going to be playing 2 cards a turn.
Yeah, generally speaking, the way they're balanced, because some of the cards like this Invigorating Strike, which is an attack for me, it's a 5. So the higher the value, the juicier the cards are going to be. If you play a handful of 3 or even 4, the publisher even told me theoretically you could get up even higher than that. But you're going to be doing a lot of little things that maybe not amount to much. But anyway, when anyone reveals their cards, you're going to look around, and those are the points, those are the cards you're going to use, but you're going to add those values up, and that's going to determine the initiative as well.
Yeah, and the initiative order is going to go from lowest to highest. You're going to carry out the actions of your cards. These are the standard actions you'd expect to see in a dungeon crawler. You're moving, you're attacking, interacting with things, doing special abilities, inflicting conditions onto the enemies. There's a lot that goes into the tactical combat. It's very deep, so we're not really going to break down every aspect of that combat, but it's worth noting that each of these decks is specific to that class, like we said.
Yeah.
I have the rogue, David has the healer, we have the warrior and archer sitting off to the side that we're not using, and you can unlock more as you progress. There's some secret classes you can unlock as you play. But each of these decks is kind of built around some similar concepts that tie into your special class abilities. And this is full of unique cards. All of these are unique. So you're going to have synergies that build, like the rogue wants to go invisible, pop out of the shadows, and do a lot of damage. And you want to kind of play to that as you're choosing your cards.
Yeah, and not only when you're choosing your cards when you're playing them, but like Ryan said, at the beginning you're going to be choosing an amount of cards for the mission, and you have more cards than what that limit is. And I'm sure throughout the game, you're probably going to gain access
you're going to be able to upgrade that
to more of them. But I'm the healer. I have some healing cards, some of which are going to be very situational, where I have to end my turn next to or adjacent to allies, things like that. So it does really give you a lot of flavor between the classes and kind of emphasizes that cooperative nature, because I clearly, just looking at my cards through the gameplay that we played, I am very much about healing.
Right.
Like the attacking, not so much, but I did have some in there. And it is important to note that you can't always sort of use a card not for what it says, but for sort of
just
a very basic attack.
Yeah, so you're
yeah.
never out of luck on that. The enemies have a deck too, which this is also very interesting and different. I'll say this is a little unique from things I've seen before. And every enemy you're fighting against does have a card. And it's going to give you some basic stats of that card. But it's also going to be, again, a species and a class just like we have. Every species has a deck, and every class has a deck. So if I'm fighting this Slink Archer, I would get out the Archer deck and the Slink deck. And every round, you're going to draw one of each, and that's going to kind of determine how their actions play out. In addition, you might recognize, if you're seeing it from the top here, but I'll go ahead and give you a little closer look. Every single one of these characters has an HP dial that almost is like build your own hero clicks on here. You're going to be able to move that to track HP, but they're all different colored bases. The book is going to tell you which bases to put out. It might say put a blue one or a red one, and it might be based on player count. If you've got a full players, it might say a blue, a red, and a yellow. Every one of those enemy cards is going to have colors. So each enemy is going to do something different on their turn based on the color of their base. So it's not flip a card, everyone is attacking.
Right.
It's going to be very variable.
And that's really cool. So if there's a group of 3 of the same type, they're going to be different colors. So it's going to give you a lot more flavor for what they're doing. I think that's going to kind of play out as a much more interesting sort of scenario.
Well, it is going to make it more difficult to just know what an enemy can possibly do, because there are so many options. There are bosses as well. We put the boss board out even though we don't have a boss here on the board. The boss board is similar. They have their own deck too, and it's going to tell you exactly what they're going to do, except the boss has just a preset list of moves, but every boss card is going to tell you they're going to do what's on the card, and they're going to do one of their basic moves, and they're going to do whatever their inherent ability is every turn. So bosses are a lot like fighting enemies, but on steroids.
Yeah, the big difference there being the inherent ability, because they're going to do that every time, whereas the normal enemies don't have an inherent ability. This boss here, the Growlic, it moves too, whereas those guys are usually going, you flip the card, you find out if it's going to move or if it's going to attack. This one's always going to move and then do one of these three things. It makes the bosses pretty interesting. Like I said, we actually stopped shy of fighting the boss. But again, the game promises to potentially have more and more bosses, obviously, throughout the game.
Yeah, so of course there's just a lot going on. We've only touched on a little bit of it. Another variable thing that's going to happen is event cards that are going to happen every round. The tutorial kind of gives you the events, but as you kind of progress through the game, you're going to be building this event deck, and you're going to be drawing event cards every round. And this event deck is even random. So even if you play the same mission multiple times, the events are going to be different. The enemies could potentially be different. So you're going to be using different tactics to engage in those missions. And you may even replay missions. Now, there's a core reason why you want to do that.
This is kind of cool.
Like I said, you're going to be kind of unlocking things as you go. It's possible that you'll get to a mission that has multiple things you can do. You might not do all of them, which means maybe you didn't unlock a special mission. And a lot of the aspects of the game are going to have you collecting these orbs and like power cores that can power all of your character stuff. You're going to be trying to find these orbs. And some of these orbs actually are like Easter eggs or hidden
kind of
unique orbs.
They're not just another orb.
That actually like link you to this little book and like give you some flavor text and unlock some stuff. So there are potentially reasons to go replay missions, not just to like, grind out and get better experience, like more skill points to spend and whatever, but there are actually narrative reasons to potentially go back and replay missions. But generally you're going to be always just moving forward through the story in whatever kind of path you decide to weave.
Yeah, I also really like the thematic explanation of replaying the missions in this case, because you're basically in some sort of training simulator on your ship, sort of going through that situation again, which I think is it's a tiny little touch, but it makes the replaying of the mission narratively and thematically make sense.
Yeah, so we have not played through the whole narrative. Obviously, if you haven't gotten it from all the components and what we've been discussing, those Mass Effect references are spot on. It is just this big sci-fi epic. You're going to be unveiling plots and narratives as you play. You're going to be unveiling story through those side quests as well, and it's all kind of tying in together to a big narrative, but that narrative is going to be different for every player. You're not going to play, there's 12 missions for every planet. You're not necessarily going to be playing all 12 missions for all the planets, and this is going to take you to different endings kind of based on what you've done during the game, which is neat as well.
Yeah, so like we said off the start, it is an ambitious game, and it's going to be really interesting to see how this unfolds as we play more into it. But if you have any questions about what we talked about today, please make them in the comments below. We'll get down there and answer whatever we can, and be sure to check out their Kickstarter. I'm sure they have all of the details there.
Yeah, except I'm sure they won't spoil everything.
No.
But they definitely, I know they hinted some of the other character classes you can unlock.
Yeah, they did tell us we could show everything that we've shown you today without really spoiling much. But like I said, get down there and ask us some questions. And until next time, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then.